If your edge beveler is tearing instead of gliding, you need this one trick to transform your leathercraft. Edge bevelers get dull quicker than you think. So when you're just starting out as a beginner, you typically buy cheaper tools and these don't hold a sharp edge as long. In this video, I'll show you how to make your edge beveler razor sharp and how to keep it sharp as well. But first, let's talk about why edge bevelers dull over time. Every time you use the edge beveler, it experiences some friction, whether that's pushing against the leather, some grit on the leather, or maybe some glue. And that friction rounds off the edge and forms tiny microscopic chips in the surface of the metal. Any tool that has these chips or scratches in it then doesn't slice cleanly through the material, it scrapes along. And this scraping means that your leather pieces have a rough and torn looking edge. So here's what we're going to be using today to sharpen your edge beveler. Obviously, we'll need an edge beveler. We'll then need a sharp knife, a nice thick piece of veg tan, high grit sandpaper, somewhere around the 1200 to 2000 grit, and a needle. And then you'll need some polishing compound or jeweler's rouge. The needle is a game changer for this process, but we'll get onto that later. So first, let's talk about sandpaper, what it is, and what grit you should be using. So sandpaper is made by gluing abrasive material onto a piece of paper. So sandpaper comes in various different grit, and the grit tells you how coarse the sandpaper is. So the lower the number, the coarser the sandpaper, and the higher the number, the finer the sandpaper is. And lower grit sandpapers, somewhere in the 50 to 200 range, typically used for rounding out edges, removing a large amount of material. But then as you move up the grit, the abrasive particles become much smaller, and it's typically used for polishing and achieving a mirror finish and removing only a small amount of material. So for leather, this allows you to create a really nice smooth surface if you're burnishing an item or finishing the edges. And what we're going to be using for today is creating a really sharp finish on our edge beveler. So we need a high grit. We're going to be using somewhere around the 1500 grit. That's kind of the sweet spot, but it will work if you have something from around 1200 to about 2000 grit. So when you use sandpaper, what you're doing is actually removing material. This creates what is known as a burr on the edge of the metal. And a burr is a sharp raised edge on the reverse of the blade. So I'm also going to show you how to remove the burr and create a really nice polished edge on your beveler. If you want any value out of this video, please consider to like and subscribe. It really helps me to continue making these videos. And if you want me to do sharpening guides for different tools, drop a comment below. So next, we're going to be talking about polishing compound, what it is and why we need to use it. Polishing compound is like a really fine sandpaper that's encased in a waxed form, and that wax acts as a carrier for the fine abrasive material. So this comes in varying different ranges of coarseness. The one I'm going to be using today is the red. So that's also called jeweler's rouge, and it's used by jewelers for polishing. It's also used by leather workers around the world for sharpening tools. It has the finest level of abrasion. So by using the polishing compound and the veg tan, we can knock off that burr to create a really nice clean cut on our edge beveler. Now you can buy polishing compounds online at jewelry stores, hardware stores. It's cheap and it's great for sharpening tools. So let's have a look at how you know when your edge beveler needs to be sharpened. When you're using your edge beveler on a piece of leather, if it's very difficult to push through, if there's any resistance, if it's tearing the leather, and if it's not creating a really nice clean cut, then it definitely needs sharpening. So what you can do is you can grab a piece of leather to test this out. Now the piece I've got, and a hack here, is if you get some leather that has been dyed, but not with a full thickness dye, what you'll get is the outside, the grain side will be dyed, but then the flesh side will not be dyed. And then this just helps you to see the contrast. Using this, you'll be able to know exactly when you need to sharpen it. You can also see it on undyed pieces of leather. You'll just have to look a little closer. So go ahead and bevel the edge of the leather and then look at it closely after. So when I'm doing this, I feel like a lot of resistance when I'm pushing it through. It's not very clean. It's creating a really scragged edge down here. There's lots of little tears and it just looks terrible. So the next step will be actually how to sharpen the edge beveler. So earlier we mentioned that we needed a needle to do this. This really helps to sharpen the edge beveler. And the reason we do it is the edge beveler is actually a blade that's encased within either side, these two metal guards, and that protects the blade, but it also restricts the amount of material you can take off. So you get a really nice consistent bevel each time that you use the tool. So what we want to do is we want to get the sandpaper into this crack so that we can take off a little bit of material and sharpen that edge. So what we do here is we put the needle down on our work surface, and then we will put our sandpaper over the top of the needle. Then we'll get our blade, we'll put our index finger just on top of the tool, and then what we'll do is we will pull it back towards us along the sandpaper. We don't want to take off too much material, so we're just going to do a few passes of this, maintaining the same angle that we would when we're beveling. And you can see on the sandpaper that some of the metal is coming off onto it, so that's good. We can see that we're taking some material off. And you don't need to do too many passes, and let's just start with about 5 different passes. So now on the edge of this bevel, we're going to have a slight burr on the other side. So we need to remove that. So what we want to do here is we want to take our piece of veg tan and we want to cut a nice crisp new line. And it's important to cut a new line because we want a nice 90-degree edge from the grain side of the leather to the edge that we have just cut. So next what we do is we take our polishing compound, and I'm going to be using the jeweler's rouge, so the red variety, and then we want to take it and just rub it up and down this edge. And you can see that the veg tan starts to distribute this jeweler's rouge really nicely. Then what we do is we take our beveler and we put our finger on top of the tool again, and we pull the beveler back towards us in the same angle and the same motion that we did previously, so that you sharpen and you polish in the same direction as you would normally. So we're just pulling it back, a few firm pulls, and you'll see on here that there'll be some metal color. So what's happening is the burr that we created from the sandpaper is now being transferred and being removed from the edge beveler onto the veg tan. So that's exactly what we want. So 5 to 10 passes on this side will be sufficient. Just keeping a nice bit of pressure on the top of the tool. And now we're ready to test out the edge beveler. So we can get a piece of leather and we can just test it out. We got our nice ribbons, cutting off a nice consistent amount of leather. Now this isn't quite sharp enough, so what I'll do is I'll just repeat that process again. So I'll take my sandpaper with the needle and do 5 or so pulls backwards at that right angle. And then I'll take my veg tan, create a nice cut, put the polishing compound on, and then I'll strop it backwards until you get a really nice sharp blade that's cutting exactly how you want to. So now we've got a sharp blade. Next, we're going to be talking about how to keep it sharp and why it's so important to keep it really sharp. And you want to keep your blade sharp, and this is really important so that you can create really nice professional looking pieces. So what you can do is when you're midway through a leather project, you can keep a piece of veg tan on your workbench with some polishing compound on the edge, in between your edge bevels. Put your finger on top of the tool and then just drag it back a few times. And then you can go back to your edge bevel and then just pull it back. This just allows you to keep that edge really nice and sharp and to not let it get into a state where it's really dull and you need to go back to the sandpaper. And that will keep your beveler really sharp for a long time. Great, so thanks for watching.